Okay, who here can say in a few words what Kubernetes is?
I would say maybe a third party platform to, control numerous types of containers to scale up and down based off the need.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on. Anyone else? Well, that am I recording yet? I am, right? Well, that is very succinct. It essentially is what Kubernetes is used for. It allows us some powerful tools for scaling up and down a variety of different instances of an application or a service. So it's powerful, but it also requires quite a bit of setup. Um, so when it comes to use cases and in terms of practicality, uh, it may be something that you'll come across much less often than you would with Docker, for example, right? That said, it's still very handy to know, and I think the experience with Kubernetes actually complements the experience you've been having with Docker and exploring Docker Compose. Very similar to Docker, with Kubernetes, we are able to instantiate from an image. Instead of calling it a container, however, we're calling them pods. So what does that look like? If we go to, well, let me back up a bit. No, not yet. If we go to Minikube and in our terminal run Minikube dashboard, I'll back up after this and explain what Minikube is. We can see what our current Kubernetes workload and deployments look like. So I've got one deployment, or sorry, multiple deployments, and as you can see, two of them are in a poor state, but I have one that is in an okay state, and it's been around since like 6 months ago. So just like how you had to learn with Docker, all these different components, right? Like what an image is, what volumes are, what networks are, what containers are. Kubernetes is going to have its own convention that you'll have to learn and follow, right? So instead of containers, we have pods. Um, you could think of deployments as being collections of pods. I don't know if I would say that actually, but you could also have clusters and nodes. And the syntax for accessing all of this is actually it's fairly straightforward. It's very similar to Docker, how you would pass into the Docker command, either container, image, volume, whatever it is that you're trying to interact with, right? But with Kubernetes, it expects you to be a little more explicit. So if I were to do kube control uh, get pods, it will return what pods I have. And if I want to see what an individual pod looks like, I can't just say kube control describe engine X pod because it's going to complain. It's going to complain because I wasn't explicit enough with what I was asking for. And so you're going to want to specify if you're looking for a pod, you say pod. If you're trying to describe deployment, you say deployment. And with that, I can now see all of this information about this pod. It is called Engine X-pod, and it exists in a default namespace on this node. And we could see again how many nodes we have using the get command. And we can see that there is currently only one container for it. And all this additional information about like how to interact with like its IP address, for example. So that's running Kubernetes commands in a nutshell. Let's talk about Minikube though, because when we when if you're working with Kubernetes, which you'll likely be working with really in a professional setting with an existing infrastructure, right? Maybe if you're lucky, you'll get to build up a Kubernetes cluster from scratch, but you'll likely be working with something that already exists. And basically, what's happening is Kubernetes is running on a node, on a host, and it needs to live somewhere, right? Minikube is essentially a localized version of that. So similar to how if you were to install Postgres on your local machine, you would have a Postgres agent or daemon running as a service. You would need to start up some kind of, I guess, service to activate Kubernetes. And we can do that with Minikube. So if I were to do Minikube status, we'll see that I have my Minikube currently running. It's got some of this additional information. I can do Minikube stop and it will kill my Kubernetes service. And all of the pods will shut down and they will no longer be accessible. Okay, so while it's doing that, okay, I guess that was a lot faster than expected. We could do Minikube start to spin things back up. And so the commands that we will be learning for this, it's going to be a combination of Minikube commands, which are commands that we pass to Minikube itself, and kube control commands, which you would be running in any Kubernetes um, instance, basically. So not just Minikube, but like let's say Kubernetes running on a server, or if you were to use something like Colima or Rancher to run Kubernetes. Okay, it's doing its thing. This might take a little longer, so let's let that keep doing its thing. And let's go back to today's lesson. All right, we're talking about the architecture and commands today, and we're installing Minikube. So could set you all off on the right foot for the rest of the week. Let's see, what is Kubernetes? It comes from the Greek word,
Okay, can you post a link to that repo in the chat, please?
sure. Let's open the chat. Okay. Oh, shoot. We need to go to the main branch. Let me, I mean, it should be the same thing, but here's a cleaner link. Right, we are on week 20. You guys only have a few weeks left until your capstone projects. We might add another week of Kubernetes depending on how you all feel, based on your readiness for the next assessment, but we'll talk about all of that later. Back to what Kubernetes is. It comes from the Greek word for helmsman or pilot, so symbolizing guidance and control. So thematically, it makes sense once you know what Kubernetes means. Um, it's often abbreviated as K8S, and the 8 is really just a representation of the number of characters between the K and the S in Kubernetes. And it's just faster to type out, right? So as an orchestration platform for automating deployment, scaling, and management, containerized apps, its use cases would include running architectures that consist mostly of microservices, managing complex apps across multi-cloud environments. I mean, that's kind of generic. I mean, sure, I guess. Enabling continuous integration, continuous delivery pipelines. Um, but that's not really unique to Kubernetes, right? I think maybe what this is supposed to be getting at is it can improve quality of a pipeline because it allows for scalability, resilience, portability, and just like a lot of the other platforms we've been learning, there is a community and ecosystem around it that we can learn a lot from and that we can utilize to help us do more wacky, creative things with Kubernetes. Okay, so when you deploy an app on Kubernetes, you're launching it within a cluster. And like I was saying just a second ago, we are going to be using Minikube to create a cluster. And a cluster in Kubernetes is really just a collection of nodes that will run the containerized applications. And that will consist of a control plane, which is your master node, and then multiple worker nodes. So let's go back to VS Code. Let's look at what we had up here earlier when we ran Minikube status. That's exactly what we're seeing here, right? We have control plane that was running. Well, it should be running now that we've also started Minikube back up after stopping it, as well as some workers running as well, right? So Minikube status again should show us the same thing. So in a local development environment like the one that you're running, all of this is running on your local machine. And when you run an app inside of a pod, it's essentially containerized within these workers. And this is a visualization of that. Everything within the cluster will be either inside of the control plane or one of your many worker nodes. And the control plane, as you would expect, is what handles things like scheduling and tracking data on all of the nodes, um, and interacting with external APIs, right? And within the individual nodes themselves are the pods that you spin up and down based on your use case. Okay, so we have in our control plane an API server, so we can interact with the Kubernetes API. We have a manager that monitors the cluster states and a scheduler that assigns work, like the deploying or spinning down of a pod, and a key value storage, which we're going to use. We'll need for credentials and whatnot, secrets, variables. Let's see. And within each worker node is the smallest deployable unit, and that would be the pod. You could think of these as being building blocks for higher level workload objects like deployments and services. So many pods will make up a deployment. Okay, and let's see. This is the part that we want to all run inside of our terminals right now. Let's see. I'm going to drop this link off in here as well. So install it on your machine based on what system you're running. Once it's installed, you should be able to run this command. I think let me see. So let's take a second to do this and let me know if anyone runs into any issues. It's this part. Okay. So I think like a few minutes ago, I said something along the lines of when you're using Minikube, use the Minikube command, and that lets you know you're using Minikube. It sounds a little silly and kind of obvious and redundant to say, but I think the point I was getting at was to get us here to this point, right? You're running both kube control and Minikube commands, and they're different things, right? Like they're different sets of commands. We alias kube control to Minikube space kube control here, and we use the double dash to specify that we're passing arguments specifically to kube control when we use that command. Okay, and what does all of that mean? That just basically means when you're running kube control, if you use this alias, you're actually running Minikube. You're passing into Minikube the kube control command. You're asking Minikube to run this kube control command for you. If you were, let's say, interacting with Kubernetes inside of, I don't know, a cluster that is containerized in something like Colima locally, you wouldn't be using this alias, right? Like the Minikube commands won't exist for you at all. That said, just know that you'll be able to use kube control commands in any um, Kubernetes cluster, but Minikube commands like Minikube dashboard are going to be unique to Minikube. And let's take a look at that dashboard again. This is actually configurable through something else that's part of Kubernetes called Helm. And let's take a look at what that looks like. Helm dashboard setup. No. Okay, we have something that looks very similar to what we see inside of Minikube, but there is additional setup with this path. So one of the benefits to using Minikube is it's very easy to set up. Like it should take really just a minute or two. Does everyone have it set up by now?
I'm still waiting on the Minikube dashboard command.
Oh, like you ran that and it's still spinning up?
Yes.
Okay.
I did the version check and looks like I got it.
hmm Okay, let's see.
Did it open up a new window for you?
For me, it did not. I'm just
Interesting.
using my terminal inside WSL.
Hmm.
What's the last thing it said? Did it say something like this?
Yes,
And does it have a URL?
it does. I guess I didn't think to click that guy.
Yeah. Is it
Uh, Julius, the link that you sent us, we're just supposed to do step one. We're not supposed to continue the other steps.
let's see. That was that the second link or the first link?
Second link.
Let's see. That might be this. Oh, yeah, no, you can do all of this. Step three is just going to confirm that the cluster is installed correctly. Yeah, let's go through these one by one, actually. So once that's running, basically you'll have to open up another terminal because the one that you ran Minikube start in will be showing you these logs. And I think if we also, oh, it does that weird thing. Keep control. Sorry, Minikube. Oh, what the? Yeah, my terminal's being bonkers. If we shoot, now I lost my train of thought. What are we doing? Minikube control. Right. Okay, so you're confirming that what was I gonna show? Shoot, what did I open up a new terminal for? Mikhail, you just asked me if we were
Uh,
running.
oh, yeah, yeah. I think you said once you do Minikube start, you have to open a new terminal or something. I don't know why you said that.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, sorry. I remember now. Um, yeah, right. So when you run Minikube start, it's like consuming your terminal, right? So I wanted to see if like there was a way to detach Minikube start the way that you know how like in Docker when you run Docker compose
Uh,
a dash key. Yeah.
so really, I ran Minikube start and it installed something and then it just gave me back control of the terminal. So it said it's done and it says cube CLCTL is now configured to use Minikube
Oh,
cluster and default, and now I have control of my terminal again. So I don't.
can you do a Minikube status?
Okay. It says Minikube type control plane host running
Okay.
kubelet running API server running and kube config configured.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting confused. Minikube dashboard. If you run Minikube dashboard, that's going to consume your terminal.
Oh,
I sorry guys, I'm a little under the weather today. Let's see. Um, okay.
When I run the dashboard, I get an error. It says no method available for opening the dashboard link. It's
Okay.
in like everything's not found, not my Google Chrome, not anything. So Firefox, nice weasel.
Hmm. Can we see? Can you share? Can we see your arrows? Hmm. And you're able to like, yeah, yeah. When you, for example, I can't think of a good example, like maybe start like a Flask app or a React app, you're able to click on those links and they take you to your browser, right? And it's,
Hmm. So even if I try to click on this link, it does open my browser, but it just says nothing to display here, which is weird because it's like here.
Mhm.
I don't know. Let me share my own screen.
Is it saying Kubernetes and then nothing to display?
Yes, that's what mine.
Isn't that where it's supposed to be? I thought that's where we're supposed to be.
Is that what? Because it said it's not working. So I guess if that's what it is, then yeah, it's working.
Can I see? Can we? Oh yeah, that's working.
That's weird. I don't know why. So it's running, but yours just hangs there. Mine doesn't do that. That's okay.
Can you click on any of the links on the left? Like, can you
Uh,
click
yeah,
on
I can.
plus and the view does the view change?
Let me share my screen one more time. Yeah, this one has something going that's different.
Okay. Okay, I see. Let's click on namespaces. Okay, so it's pretty much just set up all the default stuff. Okay, and basically everything that you see here, you'll also be able to interact with, well, I don't know, everything. Maybe not every single thing, but a lot of what you see here, you can interact with inside of your terminal using um, kube control commands. And like the what is it called? Like the page says, it's a good idea to alias kube control, especially if you, I mean, I can't even think of a reason why you wouldn't want to. Yeah, that way you don't have to like type out minikube kube control dash dash every time you run a kube control command. Okay. So I've not actually went through this, but let's see what this is like. So it looks like we're going to create a deployment. We're going to name it Hello Minikube. We're going to use a pre-built image from this registry. And let's see what happens. Got that created. Now we can expose this deployment and we do get services. See that it's up and running. And if we run this command, it takes us to confirmation. Starting tunnel for service hello Minikube. So that's creating a service. Where was I? also do this. We go to localhost 7080. You see the same thing. So we can see how just running these commands in our terminal gets us to this location a lot faster than we than Docker might if we were to write a Docker file, build um, an image out of it, spin up the container, etc. Maybe not that much faster, and that all again boils down to complexity. But Minikube and Kube Control have a lot of really good commands to make it a little easier to navigate and execute. Let's see. We can do things like pause and unpause our cluster because let's say you don't want to delete your cluster because you don't want to like lose all of your progress if you're working on something, but it's eating up memory, so you might want to stop it from time to time. Let's talk about development use cases. When you when you land a role, even if it's regardless of whether it's a DevOps or a software engineering role, you're going to be working with whatever tech stack or infrastructure your organization and company has already built out. And one common use case for Kubernetes in a development environment is to quickly be able to spin up and spin down an application for testing purposes, right? So you could just run commands like you could just start up your cluster and spin it down to get the app up and running, as opposed to having to do the whole Docker. Well, Docker Compose isn't even really that complicated, but I'm gonna take that all back. I'm not even gonna make the comparison anymore between Minikube and Docker. I don't think I don't know if that's too valuable. I guess the takeaway is um they're different platforms, different tools with different use cases and different strengths and weaknesses, right? I think working with them firsthand is really the best way to get a feel for um, you, not only your own preferences, but what the strengths and weaknesses of each tool is. I do like the large amount of commands and whatnot, and the dashboard and things like that you have access to with Kubernetes. Um, Writing Helm files and stuff, I don't really like as much. But again, it's all preferential at the end of the day. So far we've installed Minikube. We have run a few kube control commands. Try playing around with things like get, right? So you could get services, pods, etc. Let's see. Do we want to talk about configuration at all? Whoops. Okay, no, I don't think we do. Let's see. Okay, we could talk about configuring pods. So just like how you would write a Docker file to create an image that you would spin a container up from, you would write a manifest for an Nginx pod that you can build using the kube control apply command. So here in this example, we have an Nginx configuration. It's saying that this is a pod. It's passing in some metadata so that when we interact with this inside of our terminal or inside of the dashboard, we could see it by name, Nginx-pod. And then we specify what it actually is, right? It's going to be a single container named Nginx using an Nginx image with port 80 exposed. And if we apply this, oh, I don't remember what directory I'm supposed to be in. Let's close out of that. Maybe up one more. Okay. If we look at our Nginx pod configuration here, it's the same thing. And if we do kube control apply, I think I've already got it running though. Let's see, Nginx pod. Whoops, got my -f, I think. It will create another pod. So now if I do kube control get pods, it's going to show that we have just started up another Nginx pod. Or I guess just one because I stopped Minikube earlier and killed off my other Nginx pod. Okay. Minikube, stop. Oh, we should have exec into it. Let me start this back up and we can do that last command. You could also just do it on your local machine too, right? Try out kube control exec -it on the pod that you've just created, and you'll be able to exec into it the way that we've been able to exec into containers. Okay. And there is a lab here, a very simple lab. Okay. Basically, we saw in our configuration a metadata section, and this is where we could add annotations. So if we add some annotations, we'll be able to interact with those annotations later on. And right, so if we were to describe that pod or specifically get that pod and then pass in an option JSON path specifically asking for the meta annotations, then we could retrieve that and it'll show us in our terminal what those annotations are. Okay. Okay. All right. So notice how after stopping the cluster and starting it back up, the node that we had just created no longer exists. Say node, yeah, the pod no longer exists. But we still have all of these other pods. Um, and the reason is they belong to deployments. So by having your pods assigned or attached to a deployment, you could have that persist. And so we see I've got this Kubernetes probes pod from a little over half a year ago, still up and running. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and let's just add some of these annotations to our existing manifest. Okay. Let's make sure our indentations are correct. What else? That's about it. Now, if we, same thing, we just reapply this and we get the pods. See that it's up and running. Then we'll be able to extract those annotations. Not very pretty, but you could always parse that data programmatically later on. Okay. That's about it. Pretty easy and painless, right? Let's see what's today. All right. The challenges are to create a manifest running the Dojo jump game and to create a multi-container pod. Apparently a highly challenging assignment. Oh, there's a lot in here. I need to check something. I need to see if they're all in here because this is like a repeating assignment. Well, today's challenge has six different assignments. Um, get through what you can. I'm sure we'll revisit this assignment in the future. Adam made some changes to this repo over the weekend, so now I'm a little lost. That said, if everyone's got it set up, I think we are good to go. Let me cut the recording and we can work on presenting assessments.